Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and lock your doors. You have entered the world of the unknown. Welcome to the Dead Hour broadcast.
Elias took the job at Blackwood Ridge because he needed the silence. 3 months as a fire lookout in the most remote sector of the Pacific Northwest seemed like the perfect antidote to a noisy, messy breakup and the general chaos of city life. The ranger station had warned him, "It's just you, the trees, and the radio for 90 days. People start hearing things up there." Elias had just smiled. That was the point. The tower was a 60-foot steel skeleton topped with a 14 by 14 glass-walled cabin, the Catwalk. It offered a stunning, terrifying 360-degree view of an endless ocean of pines. For the first 2 weeks, it was paradise. He read, he hiked the perimeter, he scanned the horizon for smoke, and he slept deeply. The strangeness began in week 3. It started with smells. Elias would wake up at 3 a.m., his heart hammering, certain he smelled ozone and wet copper, the scent of an approaching thunderstorm. Yet looking out the glass walls, the sky was a tapestry of clear, hard stars. The air was bone dry. Then came the sounds. The wind at that altitude didn't just blow, it howled. It whipped around the metal grating of the catwalk, creating harmonics that sounded bizarrely human. Sometimes it sounded like sobbing, other times like distant laughter. Elias rationalized it. Wind shear, metal fatigue, just physics. On the 19th night, the radio cracked to life. It wasn't the scheduled evening check-in from base. It was static. Thick, wet static, like someone breathing heavy into a microphone covered in mud. "Base, this is Tower 4. Do you copy?" Elias gripped the mic, looking out into the pitch blackness. The nearest human was 30 miles away down a treacherous logging road. The static hissed back. Then, buried deep within the white noise, a sound. Click, click, click. It sounded wet, like a tongue clicking against the roof of a dry mouth. "Base, you're breaking up. Say again." Click, click. "Elias." He dropped the mic. It clattered loudly on the wooden floor. He hadn't imagined it. The static had shaped itself into his name. Not Elias. Elias. A slithering distortion of it. He sat up all night, clutching his bear spray, staring at the radio. It remained silent. By day, the forest looked innocent again. Elias almost convinced himself it was a dream brought on by altitude and solitude. He went about his duties, chopping wood at the base of the tower. As he swung the axe, he grunted with effort. Hup, hup. He stopped to wipe sweat from his brow. From high above, near the top of the tower, the sound echoed back. Hup, hup. It wasn't an echo. An echo is fainter, delayed. This was immediate and flat. It sounded exactly like him, but without the breath behind it, like a recording played on bad speakers. He looked up. The midday sun glared off the glass cabin. It was empty. That night, Elias didn't sleep. He sat in the center of the room, away from the windows. The feeling of being watched was physically painful, a pressure on the back of his neck. Around 2 a.m., something tapped on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Elias froze. He was 60 feet in the air. There was no balcony. There was only sheer glass and a steel drop. He slowly turned his head. The moonlight illuminated the east-facing window. There was condensation on the outside of the glass. And in the condensation, something was drawing a line with a long, thin finger. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a raccoon. The finger was impossibly long, multi-jointed. He watched, paralyzed with primal terror, as the finger finished its drying. A crude stick figure of a man. Then it drew a jagged line across the neck. Elias lunged for the radio. "Mayday! Base, this is Tower 4. I have an intruder. I need help immediately. There's someone on the tower." Static hissed. Then a voice cut through. It was his own voice. "Mayday! Base, this is Tower 4. I have an intruder." The radio mimicked perfectly, but with a sickening, mocking undertone. "Who are you?" Elias screamed at the radio, at the windows, at the night. The radio crackled again. The voice that came out was a grotesque collage of sounds he'd made over the past weeks. A cough, a hum, the grunt of chopping wood, stitched together into a sentence. "Elias, lonely. Elias, open the hatch." The trapdoor in the floor, the only way into the cabin, rattled violently. Elias grabbed the fire axe. The metal hatch buckled upward. Something incredibly strong was slamming against it from the stairs below. The heavy iron bolt held, but the wood around it began to splinter. Slam! 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 The radio shrieked, a high-pitched feedback loop that drilled into his skull. Through the glass, he saw movement. Things were crawling up the steel legs of the tower. Not one thing, many. They were pale, spindly, moving with the jerky speed of spiders, but they were man-sized. The hatch gave way with a deafening crack. Elias swung the axe blindly at the opening. He connected with something soft that let out a sound he'd never heard an animal make, a high, vibrating thrum that shattered the glass of the oil lantern on the table. The cabin plunged into darkness, lit only by the moon. A hand reached up through the broken hatch. It was gray, elongated, with too many knuckles. He backed against the far window, terrified. The thing pulled its torso through. It was vaguely humanoid, naked, its skin like wet clay. Where a face should be, there was only smooth gray flesh, save for a vertical slit that pulsed. It stood up, towering over him in the cramped cabin. It tilted its faceless head. From the slit in its face came the perfect sound of Elias's ex-girlfriend laughing, followed by the sound of his mother crying. It was digesting his memories, weaponizing the sounds of his life. Elias looked at the window behind him. It was a 60-foot drop to the rocks below. A quick death versus whatever this thing was. The creature took a step forward, extending those awful fingers. The radio, still on the floor, crackled one last time. It wasn't the creature's voice. It was the automated weather service tone, calm and robotic. Severe thunderstorm warning in effect for Blackwood Ridge area. Seek shelter immediately. A blinding flash of lightning turned the world white, instantaneously followed by a thunderclap that shook the tower to its foundations. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure frequency that made Elias's nose bleed and recoiled from the sudden light. It was his only chance. Elias didn't attack the creature. He turned and swung the fire axe with all his might at the thick plate glass window behind him. It shattered outwards into the void. The wind roared into the cabin. Without looking back at the gray horror reaching for him, Elias stepped out into the empty air. The Rangers found him 2 days later at the base of the tower. He was broken, half frozen, but alive. He never spoke about what happened up there. He just pointed to the top of the tower. When they investigated the cabin, they found it thrashed. The radio was melted, as if by intense heat, and scratched into the wooden floor over and over again. In handwriting that looked unsettlingly like Elias's own, was a single phrase. "It knows my voice now. It knows my voice now. It knows my voice now."
The story ends here, but the fear remains. If you want to survive the night, hit that subscribe button. And remember, don't look under your bed tonight.